Hey, I'm Melanie, personal trainer, nutrition coach, and creator of Female Fitness Systems. Welcome to Techinque Talk. In this series, we take an in-depth look at popular exercises, and I share simple, effective tips based on over a decade of experience training women. We'll talk about common mistakes, how to get a better muscle connection, and problems, if any, that come up with these exercises as you get older. Today, we're looking at banded abductors, a fantastic glute exercise, especially if you train at home with limited equipment. I'll provide plenty of tips for using bands effectively throughout this video. And at the end of it, I'll talk about how to incorporate banded abductors into your workouts. Remember, if all of this seems a bit overwhelming and you want somebody to take care of all of it for you, check out my programs over on femalefitnesssystems.com, and I'll also link to them in the description below this video. So the first thing I want to do today is show you where you should be feeling banded abductors, because one of the things my ladies always ask is, where am I supposed to feel this exercise? So let's talk about that first. Most of you don't need to know in-depth anatomy, so I'll just put up on the screen now where you want to feel banded abductors. We're working the glute muscles that pull your legs out to the side. So you should feel it in the upper part or the side of your glutes. Now, the first tip that I have for you today has to do with positioning. And what I wanted to talk about is where you sit on the seat when you're doing seated banded abductors, because when we change this, it usually makes a big difference to how difficult the exercise feels, and that's a good thing. We want to make the exercise feel more difficult and for you to feel it working the right muscles. So if you sit fully on the seat, which most ladies do when they go to do banded abductors, you sort of pin your glutes down. And I've found that you will feel these so much more if you scoot all the way forward to the edge of the bench with as little of your glutes on the seat as possible. Now, when you're looking at a bench, you're going to find that most of them will have one end that's more pointy than the other. Usually the seat is more pointy. You also want to sit on this end because it will also mean that you pin your glutes down less. So sit on the pointiest end of the bench. Now, the angle at which you sit doesn't matter too much if you want to lean forward or back or sit perfectly upright. I think most people think that they have to follow the exact same form that they see other people doing, but what you really should be doing is trying to figure out how to position your body so you feel it in the muscles you want to feel working. And everybody is different, so don't be afraid to play around when you're doing exercises and try to make whatever exercise you're doing feel best for you. But remember, best doesn't mean that the exercise feels easier. You're trying to find a position where your muscles feel like they are working the hardest, which goes against our natural instincts. The other thing that you need to know is that whenever an exercise gets hard, your body is going to naturally compensate and try to find a position where it feels easier to lessen the pain that you're feeling. And so what tends to happen is that in any exercise, but in the banded abductors especially, we will start to lose good posture. So you'll find that you start to hunch over a little bit. And so what we want to do with abductors is make sure that you keep your chest lifted the whole time. And in this video, you'll see that most of the time I'm pushing down into the seat behind me with my hands. That does two things. It sort of lifts me off the seat even more so that my glutes aren't pinned down as much, but it also helps me keep that good posture. But for a lot of ladies, that's not going to be possible because you might have tight shoulders. You might not be able to reach around behind you and grab the seat. So again, just do what feels best for you, but make sure that you're always thinking about keeping that chest lifted, especially as the exercise starts to feel harder and harder. Now, the other thing I get asked about a lot with banded abductors has to do with foot positioning, and it doesn't really matter. Again, it's about finding the foot position that feels best for you, but make sure your feet are wide enough so that the band never loses tension. And for some ladies, it feels better if you sort of roll onto the edges of your feet as you're doing the exercise. I find I tend to do this. I prefer that to having a flat foot. And you can also play with the angle of your feet. You might feel it better with your feet facing perfectly forward, or you might feel these better with your feet turned slightly in. The other really important thing to understand when it comes to training with bands is muscle connection. Banded exercises in general will feel too easy unless you think about connecting with your muscles. And if you aren't sure how to do this, the best tip I can give you is to slow down. Don't just go through the motions. Make every movement very slow and deliberate. And pretty much every lady I have ever worked with in person has moved too fast when they're doing exercises, and they miss that muscle connection. And so when I work with my ladies in person, I am constantly telling them to slow down their movements. And when I write programs for my ladies online, I always include notes about tempo, because I know this is a common mistake, and I want my ladies to slow down their exercises and get more out of their workouts. So it's highly likely that you will benefit from slowing down any exercise you do. And when it comes to banded abductors, you're going to feel them so much more when you slow down. Now, on that note, you should also move very smoothly. So what I mean by that is, from the moment you start to push out your knees, you should be moving slow. And then I like to hold and pause and squeeze when I'm at the widest part. And then don't just let your legs flop back in. You want to reverse back in under control and fight against that resistance. No bouncy, no quick movements. And this will make a huge difference to how these feel. So in this video, you're going to see it looks like I'm moving very slow. And that's what you should always be doing, because I promise you, it will take any band exercise you do to the next level. You're going to get so much more out of your training if you do this. And you should actually be able to hit failure with bands when you use these techniques. And so a good rule is, if you can do more than about 25 to 30 reps of a banded exercise without needing a rest, then you really need to work on connecting with your muscles. But on that note, when it comes to training with bands in general, it's very important that you replace your bands regularly, because over time they stretch and start to feel too easy. And so I wanted to mention that today as well. I can't say how often you need to replace them, because it depends on the brand of your band and how much you train, but at least every year and maybe sooner. And if you buy a pack of bands, you're going to see different levels of bands. Most beginners can use the medium level bands. The easier levels of bands tend to be just way too easy. So you can bypass those, grab a medium level and start there if you're a beginner. But if you aren't a beginner, you should be using the hardest bands in those packages. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about today is, how do you use banded abductors? Well, there's a lot of ways you can use them in your workout. They are great as a warm-up, and I will often include them in warm-up circuits. You can use them as a burnout. So burnouts are basically something you do at the end of your workout to fully exhaust your muscles. So it's pretty similar to a warm-up circuit. You just do it at the end of your workout to make sure that you've really just done the hardest workout possible and to just really exhaust those glutes. And the other thing you can do is use them to pre-exhaust your muscles so that you don't have to lift as heavy on exercises like squats. And this technique also means that you tend to feel your glutes working more when you do the squats. So think of this as turning on your muscles, turning on your glutes, and exhausting them before you go into an exercise like a squat, or say some lunges, or even like an RDL. And in this way, you turn on your glutes and you tend to not have to lift as heavy for those other exercises, because you will feel your glutes working more. So this is a really popular way to use bands. Now, I know all of this can be overwhelming, especially if you are just starting out. So remember, if you want some help, I'll leave a link to my programs in the description of this video. All the programming is done for you, so you don't have to figure this out on your own. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, because it helps my channel so much. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, so you catch future videos from me. Thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it, and I will see you again soon.